How you doing?
Good, good.
Things have been totally crazy around here. A couple days ago, our 3-year-old ate a pretzel that was one of these like Trader Joe's peanut butter containing pretzels. And so we learned the hard way that she's also allergic to nuts. We, I think our family's like a medical anomaly. All the kids are allergic to nuts, all three.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we could like go into like a freak show or something.
Nah, it's just been busy.
Yeah.
May's been crazy. My daughter just graduated from high school, so between that and traveling to AZ and trying to finish up on that project, I feel like I've aged 10 years in the last few months.
Yeah, that happens with these gigs. Like, I find that every day on these jobs feels like a week. So when you're there for 4 days, it feels like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to Device Squad, the enterprise mobility podcast from Propelics, which I think we're now calling it the podcast for the mobile enterprise to help our SEO situation with the word mobile. But don't worry, folks. I know you're probably a little nervous now that I've said that, but the content will remain the same. Device Squad, fighting crimes against enterprise mobility worldwide. Bad UI, frustrating user experiences, poorly conceived mobile strategies, we defeat them all. This podcast series will cover all aspects of enterprise mobility, including strategy, development, design, testing, and more. My name is Steve Brickman. I'm a mobile strategist and UX architect with Propelics. First, a brief history of the company. Founded in 2011, Propelics is a mobile strategy consultancy helping enterprises worldwide devise true mobile strategies and develop world-class mobile applications across all industry verticals. Propelics clients include large companies like Amway, Bright Horizons, Bank of Montreal, Dubai Airports, Family Dollar, DLL, Cintas, Merck, and many more. Propelics' menu of services includes 8 different mobile kickstarts, covering everything from mobile strategy and road mapping to MCOE to UI UX design to mobile testing strategy, along with soup to nuts app design development and support. Additionally, Propelics offers 3 homegrown enterprise mobile products. Today, Propelics mobile strategist James Hoshor will be talking with us about what insurance companies are doing in mobile these days. And we'll be talking about whether or not many of them need to rethink some of their user experience strategies. We'll be talking about what insurance companies are doing well and what they're maybe not doing so well when it comes to mobile, and also why every company needs a true mobile strategy that includes a clear roadmap and an organizational plan to support mobile. So, James, thanks for coming aboard here.
Glad to be here, Steve. I'm excited to share my insights around mobility and certainly in the insurance industry.
Sure. So first of all, why don't you just introduce yourself, talk about your background a little bit, tell us how you came to work for Propelics, and specifically what got you interested in focusing on the insurance industry.
That's a funny story. So, I actually have over 20 some years in technology. I started really in the telecommunications industry. And then evolved eventually into more of the true traditional software development and solution services over the last 15 years of my career. But actually coming out of college, I was interested in the insurance industry and becoming an agent at the time, and went through and took my Series 7 and 63 test and did it for a while. But after finding myself 6 months into it, I just didn't have the drive and the passion for it. It wasn't, I guess, as exciting as I thought it was going to be, so I found myself gravitating and heading into more of the technology space. And so, as I mentioned, starting out in telecom and then eventually going into the software and traditional solution services business. So last 10 years really have been spent 100% in mobile. I actually got into mobile working for a consultancy that was focused heavily actually in the renewable fuels industry. And so we had developed some solutions that were allowing the petroleum importers and producers to track what they call renewable identification numbers. So believe it or not, for every single gallon of petroleum, renewable fuel that is either imported or produced in the U.S. has a 37-digit number, unique number that's attached to it that they track all the way through to your local gas station from the EPA perspective. So we are actually developing mobile solutions that were allowing companies to track that whole process and transaction flow. And then, yeah, so it was exciting. That kind of got me hooked initially, but then I eventually expanded from that organization, working with a couple startups that were more focused in a broader spectrum or broader industries out there, and insurance happened to be one of those. So being located in the Midwest, there's a lot of insurance companies that are based here as well in the Nebraska and Iowa, Kansas, Dakota area. And so majority of the customers that I was involved with or have been involved with in my career naturally were in the insurance space. So and those customers ranged across all kinds of different lines of insurance, from crop insurance to life insurance and voluntary benefits and dental, et cetera. So it's been something that I just have naturally evolved into and have served in this industry, in this space for, like I said, the last 10 years or so. And I think the thing that intrigues me with the insurance industry as well is it is a mature industry overall. Obviously, it's been around for a century plus. A lot of these companies, when you look at the Lloyd's of London and some of the other prominent insurance organizations like Mutual of Omaha and such, right? And they have some very complex systems and processes, but yet it's something that we all need every day in our lives. Is insurance. So it's not certainly going away. So I think the intrigue of trying to help them solve their complexities and forge ahead into the mobile space has been something that I've been very interested in, and certainly, like I said, spent the last 10 years so far working with a lot of different companies across that spectrum.
Coincidentally, I worked on the original iPhone app for Progressive, and that was like way back in like January 2010. And as you'd expect, it was no great shakes as an app. I mean, you could, you could review your policy, but you couldn't make changes. You could pay your bill, you could file a claim, which was kind of a big deal at the time. But people complained about how rudimentary it was, even though it was still did more than the Geico app, which I think was a major priority for Progressive. But these days, just 6 years later, Progressive is doing a lot more. The app does a lot more. You can now make changes to your policy, and they also have that snapshot program, which is that device that plugs into your OBD port in your car, and then it adjusts your insurance rates based on how you drive and the kind of behaviors you engage in while driving. So where would you say overall the insurance market is today, maturity-wise, with regards to mobility?
I look at it a couple different ways. When you look at mobile ideation as one aspect of maturity, I think we're seeing the insurance market really moving up the scale as far as maturity. There seems to be a lot of great ideas and technology innovation that we're seeing out there in insurance. I mean, you mentioned yourself with Progressive, with their snapshot and some of the things they're doing as far as the telematics and biometrics and how they're measuring your driving behaviors and all these things, right? And so obviously that's something that's been around for a couple of years now with Progressive. So they were certainly ahead of their time compared to the market out there. And you're seeing other companies. I mean, there's companies now like Bain that have really taken a leap in the last 12 months in creating a toothbrush that is incorporated the internet. And so they've got this new internet connected toothbrush that is being underwritten by the National Guardian Life Insurance Company that is being offered out to the marketplace, and consumers are liking it. And the reason is because they're actually getting a benefit from that. And so they're, using this toothbrush, and based on the use that it's recording, they get, the benefit of lowering their healthcare premiums and dental costs and so forth, right?
Do they have any internet connected floss to go with that?
Not yet, but I want to put it past them. I mean, the sky's the limit as far as technology innovation these days.
Yeah.
But so
you
then
could.
You
actually could do it if the floss container was internet connected.
There
and
you
so
go.
whenever you pulled the floss out, it would say, "Oh, floss was pulled out." Right.
Yeah.
But not so crazy.
Not too crazy. But then, if you look at the other side of the spectrum as far as maturity goes, and that's where I look at the execution and delivery. And I think that's where companies aren't as mature as we think they should be, especially in the insurance industry, right? Insurance companies have predominantly been very conservative in nature. And so they're certainly not a fast follower or a leader by any means out there as compared to other industries. But, I think that the main challenge is, as far as execution and delivery, is what we're seeing is there's still such a heavy focus on modernization of their legacy systems out there that has really been taking their focus off of the digital transformation that insurance companies should be now looking at as they're in 2016 and looking towards the future to 2020 and beyond, right? And so it was interesting. In my research, I continually do. Obviously, as a strategist, we've got to keep up with what's going on in the markets we serve, and especially around mobility. And so being focused in the insurance space, there's a lot of research I'm doing on a daily basis, and I'm looking at different studies that are out there and so forth. There was one that was done by Bain and Company, and this was their 2015 Global Digital Insurance Benchmarking Report. And it was interesting. They interviewed 1,000 executives across the U.S. and even in Europe. And one of the things that became evident as I was reading the report here is that out of the insurance executives that they surveyed, they all were pretty much on the same page about investing more in digital strategies, and that includes mobile. But, all of them also were very unclear about where to start, particularly when it was focused on redesigning their processes. They seem to have a lack of confidence in their ability to execute their digital transformations. And so that's why I said in the maturity level, as far as execution to delivery, I think the market is low, and that's really being driven from top down. When your executives aren't clear of where they need to go and what they need to do to, really improve their processes around digital and even mobile, and they're not even confident their own abilities to go that direction as far as their engagement models and offerings, then certainly your maturity level is not going to be high. So ideation, definitely there. You're seeing a lot of companies that are forging ahead with the internet connected toothbrushes and the devices that are now being implemented into cars and such that are able to monitor driving behaviors. But as far as overall delivery and execution, we're still seeing the market very immature from that standpoint.
Interesting. And, what types of mobile engagement models are you seeing insurance companies use to connect with customers and employees and partners and so forth?
The major leading insurance companies out there have all created their consumer apps. You've mentioned Progressive, and you see Geico out there and State Farm, and a lot of the prominent brand name insurance companies out there. They all have, over the last few years, really made significant investments in their consumer apps and making sure that, if we get in an accident, we can easily report the claim and monitor the status on that, or monitoring our driving behaviors to get us better discounts and so forth. So it's been so heavily consumer focused that, the couple of the engagement, users that you mentioned, like employees and partners, are actually being overlooked. And so, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's been a significant focus on investing in modernization of the back end systems to improve the internal processes that are being used to support the end customer, the consumer, which is great. Don't get me wrong, but they're still losing sight of their agents and their partners out there and stuff. So, what this is really causing is some challenges that, when you look at the engagement model, you've got the insurance company, you've got the agent, and you've got the customer, right? The consumer out there. A lot of agents now are just directing their customers to go directly to the insurance company. And that's good. It's showing some confidence that, hey, I trust my company that they're going to take care of my customer. But the negative side of it, or the impacts that we're seeing that aren't great, is that because the systems aren't completely integrated and data is not being shared, bi-directionally both ways between the company and the agent, and even sometimes with the consumer, is that not everybody's on the same page. And so what we're seeing is that, and I recently experienced this myself, my daughter got in a car accident, and I used my mobile app to process the claim right there on the spot, which I thought was great. And I was able to take the pictures, and I was able to record everything and submit it electronically. And I was like, great, this is wonderful. But, when the day later I had heard from my insurance agent, so I contacted her and said, hey, my daughter was in an accident yesterday, and I filled out everything. I was just checking on this. She had no idea that, there was an accident and that I had reported it or anything. So the point is that, we're seeing that there are strides being made, but we're still disconnected as far as all the users, as far as the whole engagement model. And the ones that are being impacted the most are the agents or the partners out there that are, representing the insurance companies or serving, the ultimate customer at the end. We're good on helping the consumers, being more self-sufficient, and ultimately that provides many benefits to the insurance company because they're automating processes, they're removing a lot of the traditional paper, and they're cutting down time to respond and so forth. But at the same token, we're missing the other part of the equation in the overall engagement model, which is making sure that the agents that are ultimately out there on the front lines dealing with those customers and customers, they have to be in the know as well, right? And so they have to have the same data available. So if I, as a customer, contact an insurance company, they should get some type of alert or some type of notification via mobile. Is the perfect world, right? That, hey, James just contacted the company in regards to a claim, so I better follow up with James on that claim. We're only looking at one half of the equation, and so there's certainly a gap on the other part that companies, I think, are still missing today and need to put more emphasis or focus on.
Sure, makes sense. And so what are the insurance companies thinking right now? Are they sort of assuming that millennials are just going to be conducting more and more of their transactions online and eventually conducting all their transactions online? And is this the direction in which they're headed?
That's interesting because everybody just assumes, right, that the millennial generation is just this tech savvy generation, that everything they do is on a mobile device, whether it's watches and so forth out there, right? But in reality, it's not true. That millennials are still wanting to have some human interaction to make sure that they're getting the right insurance coverage, or that the support that they need is there for them. And this was evident. One of the recent surveys that I read was by an organization called Celent, and so they recently did a study with over 2,000 consumers, and it was around human interaction versus being 100% self-service. And when they really looked at it in a microscopic way, and they took it down to defining transactions as simple versus complex, and they looked at the millennial as a myth, right? The myth is that millennials want to do all their insurance 100% online. And what they found out that wasn't really the case, and that in the survey respondents for the millennial generation showed that they still were very reliant and interested in human interaction versus being 100% sufficient by using mobile. Now, when you looked at the two types of transactions, again, a simple transaction is, going online and reordering a new insurance card, or requesting a new insurance card, or paying an insurance premium online. Those are, what they would call a simple transaction. And it was almost equal there, with self-service just slightly above the human interaction aspect of the respondents. But when you looked at the complex transactions, when it was maybe regarding insurance, life insurance products, or, a car accident with a claims, things that weren't as easy to research or to find out their answers online, then it was a significant difference that even the millennials were responding that they wanted higher human interaction. And what this is really showing is that millennials, are leaning that direction, especially on the complex transactions, because, face it, it's a young generation, and the young generation over the last decade to 2 decades here has really been relying on their parents and their elders to really handle their financial transactions for them in insurance and payments and things, up to this point in their lives. And so because of that, they just really don't understand those types of transactions or complexities around them. So they are truly wanting more human interaction to assist with those types of scenarios, around claims or financial questions and so forth.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, that stuff can get pretty complicated. Definitely would feel better talking to a person who can explain things directly when I have questions. I just wonder if those human interactions will be replaced by bot interactions eventually. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But, and that says a lot. You and I are both obviously in the mobile space. We live it every day. And you would think that even us, we'd be these digital savvy users, right? And that we wouldn't need much human interaction. But at the end of the day, we're human, right? So we don't know everything. And we certainly need to rely on others that have that domain expertise. So that certainly was a myth that was busted, in the recent survey by Celent there. So
yeah, that's actually kind of refreshing to hear, given how much time we assume millennials are spending on their devices. Are you of the opinion that insurers really know what their consumers want? Like, what's their top priority? Are they thinking about the best interest of the consumer or the best interest of the company generally?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, because there's been a lot of research done on this, and then my own personal experience, with working with dozens and dozens of insurance companies over the last decade here through different strategy engagements and mobile solutions. I think insurance companies think they know what consumers want, but at the end of the day, when you take them through the ideation and you really have them stop and think about the day in the life of who their target users are with mobility, they really come to realize that they don't know truly what their consumers want or need out there. And so I think, what we're seeing is that insurance companies, unfortunately, are still this product-focused organization, right? They have all these financial products, insurance products. And so when they're creating their new solutions, whether it's mobile or web or social media, and they're taking their legacy systems and modernizing them, it's still this product focused mentality of making sure they have all these rich features and things that they can offer, but they're not really stopping to think about, what does my customer really want or need, right? Do they need all these bells and whistles that I'm going to offer to them in this product, or are they really needing this, big, robust platform that I'm spending millions of dollars and years to build out there? And the reality is, consumers aren't concerned about these platforms per se. I mean, they're fine with traditional pick up the phone and call their agent or customer service rep. It's great that they have mobile apps, at least a good portion of the insurance companies out there have a mobile app for their customers, as I mentioned earlier, that they can go get some quick answers on. But at the end of the day, what consumers are really looking for is they want their insurance company to personalize the offers that they're providing to them. They want things tailored to their specific needs, and based on how, things are tailored to them, they're expecting, that maybe I'm going to get a better insurance premium, or I'm getting a better investment depending on if I'm with a life insurance product or whatever. Right. So I think that insurance companies honestly don't know what their customers really need, at least not everything that they need. They're making assumptions, and these assumptions are focused on product and on technology versus truly understanding, what the consumer or their customers are asking for.
Interesting. So I'm hearing tighter personalization and more human interactions. Maybe, they could pursue some of this live help that's available, like on Kindle devices and things like that. When we worked on Progressive, there were a lot of pie in the sky ideas that we threw at them to sort of differentiate themselves. But none of them were able to stick because they really just weren't set up to support any of this sort of technology. So what do you see as some of the challenges that organizations face when it comes to these kind of mobile initiatives?
I think the biggest challenge, still the number one challenge, is organizational readiness. And as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, when there was a survey that was done out there that talked to, hundreds of insurance executives out there, and they themselves, at least majority of those respondents, said that they lacked the confidence in their ability to execute and really deliver on their digital transformation initiatives. That all, revolves around organizational readiness. And it's true because, again, as the companies have spent so much time and money and resources on modernizing their legacy systems to bring it up to even yesterday's technology standards, to improve processes and drive operational efficiencies, they haven't spent the time or the effort to really build the resources required for today and tomorrow's technology initiatives, which are revolving around mobile technology and social media and Internet of Things and wearables and stuff out there. So, the lack of the skill sets and resources to truly develop and deliver and provide ongoing support of those types of digital and mobile initiatives is certainly lacking today still in insurance organizations. And so I think the organizational readiness is definitely probably the top of the list. But when you look at the insurance companies, there's still this process around their different types of channels and how they deliver. And when you look at all the different channels out there, there's really two buckets. You got multi-channel and omni-channel solutions that have been defined over the years for customer engagements. And unfortunately, there's a lot of insurance companies that are, still delivering what we call this multi-channel engagement method with their customers. And so what we mean by multi-channel is, they have customer service. And so they've got IVR technology and the 1-800 numbers and such, right, that a customer can call. They've got the website, they've got mobile, they've got an online chat, different social media, Twitter and so forth, that they, provide information about their company and stuff. But with multi-channel, the disconnect there is these multi-channel engagement methods, they're not integrated together. And so me as a customer, for example, if I am dealing with an insurance organization that is really delivering true multi-channel offerings and engagement methods, what I'm experiencing is, so if I go to the website and I start looking at my policies and I start engaging through the website, but then I stop because I'm maybe have some questions or stumped by something I've run across on the website, and then I pick up the phone and call my customer service representative for that insurance organization, or even my agent for that matter, they have no idea what I've been doing on the website. They're not able to see that interaction that I've already started, that engagement I've started with my company. And so essentially I'm having to start over and explain to them why I was on the website in the first place and what I'm looking at. So, this is where omni-channel is really the direction that companies that aren't doing so anyway should be going towards. And, there's a lot of organizations or industries out there, especially like the retail, obviously, that are doing omni-channel very well. And so the difference between the multi-channel and the omni-channel is omni-channel really is where you've truly got an integrated, channel of communications out there. And so in that same scenario, if I was on the website in an omni-channel engagement model with my company, and I called that insurance agent of mine, or I called the customer service rep, they would be able to see right then and there that, my transaction, the information I've entered, and say, oh yeah, James, I see that you're interested in this insurance product for, your daughter, or you're looking for an umbrella policy and stuff. So they would be able to pick up right where I left off and, quickly and easily help me. And so we're seeing that there's still that disconnect, that companies are still, in this multi-channel delivery model versus in the omni-channel on that. So I think that's something that is causing a challenge for insurance companies as they're trying to make these digital transformations and improve their customer experiences out there.
Interesting. It sounds like an obvious problem that they would want to fix. So why don't you break down some of the general technological hurdles that you think insurers are facing today that with mobile that's sort of preventing them from adopting this omni-channel approach?
Yeah, sure. So, I think the biggest one, as I talked about, was the integration complexities, right? So, that is probably the top of the list as companies are continuing to modernize their systems in the back end. They're not, thinking about the front end, as we talked about earlier, and that the overall ecosystem of engagement with my agents or my customers. And so I think the integration complexities, that are spanning across the enterprise from the front to the back office is right at the top of the list. And in just an example I gave with the multi-channel versus omni-channel, companies aren't, fully integrated to all aspects of engagement. So there were some recent studies, again, some research and some case studies that I read out there. And believe it or not, there's even some of the prominent insurance companies, and we won't name names or anything, but one large, very well-known insurance company, when they looked underneath the covers, their customer service reps are touching 17 different disparate systems. And they don't have one single interface to provide easy access to all that information. They were having to toggle back and forth between multiple screens to get information for a customer that had called in, which obviously is time consuming and ultimately generates frustration, for the customer that is having to spend a lot of time on the phone, and certainly the customer service rep as they're fumbling through trying to find the right information. I think the other things that we're seeing out there is around data. Big data has been a bit of, the buzzword that we've heard for the last 3 to 5 years. And I think what we're seeing is, from a technology standpoint, is companies are still trying to figure out how to leverage that data and how to get access to that data so they can, use that data and harness the power from that data to analyze the risk of their customers and, make sure they have the right products to them, making sure that they're certainly, charging them the right premium based on the risk profile and such, or, providing the discounts that are needed based on the data. As you mentioned with Progressive earlier, they've got the devices that monitor our driving behaviors. And so being able to get that data in a timely fashion and turn around and then apply discounts that might be warranted to a customer, that's important. And So, I think that's another big thing. And I think the third thing we'll mention here quickly is lack of agent buy-in. As the surveys have shown that the executives aren't certainly confident in their abilities yet to deliver and to really forge ahead with their digital transformations. Well, that certainly has, continued to trickle down the line. I think what we're seeing out there is agents are saying, well, it's great that you've got a consumer app and my customers are getting some of their needs met, but yet there's nothing out there for me yet. So I think they're lacking confidence in the companies that they're representing, whether they're an independent agent or they're an agent, a W-2 employee of a large insurance organization. I think they're lacking the confidence in the insurers themselves, and because of that, they're not promoting technology as much out there to their customers and stuff. So I think there's still a lot of work to do from the insurer themselves to really instill the confidence from the executive level all the way down out to their agents.
Just want to kind of throw a curveball at you now, just because I'm so fascinated in this topic. We know that Google is developing self-driving cars, autonomous cars, and Uber is working on developing autonomous Uber. So how do you think that insurance companies are going to deal with the fact that we're being driven around by robots?
That's definitely a curveball, but insurance companies, why we're all just now kind of starting to hear about the self-driven cars and stuff, that what Google's been doing and other manufacturers are starting to do for beta. I know like Tesla's got a car that they've been baiting out there. Insurance companies actually have been looking at this for the last couple of years. And so they've been, again, going back to the beginning of the podcast here, their ideation that they've done and, their forward thinking and trying to understand what the future may hold for them. I think insurance companies are pretty mature. And because of that maturity level around that, they've actually already been, for the last 2 or 3 years, starting to, assess how this will impact their industry. And I think, one of the things that they're seeing out there is that once self-driven cars really become widely adopted, which I still think that's probably a decade or more out, that the impact obviously would probably be on the liability coverage. When you look at our auto insurance today, liability coverage is a pretty good portion of that premium. And so when we go to, finally adopting maybe 10 years from now, these self-driven cars, I think obviously that will have a big impact on our insurance premiums. And I think, could ultimately impact obviously profitability of insurance organizations out there. But, we're already making some technological advances. We're seeing the commercials nowadays with the cars that already have the accident avoidance features in them, such as automatic braking and adaptive cruise control and lane departure prevention.
Right.
Those are all becoming pretty prevalent, and they're obviously going to lead to lower accident frequencies over the next 5 to 10 years, which should benefit insurance companies, obviously, because if there's not having to pay out accidents and claims and stuff, obviously that's more money in their pocket in the long run, right? But I think in the long term, when you're looking at self-driving cars, eventually, coming to reality, and that translating, ultimately into significantly lower premiums out there due to the number of accidents declining dramatically, I think that could have an impact on there. But, there was a recent report from Moody's that I just read, and it was noted that while self-driving cars will likely force auto insurers to rethink their business models, the adoption of this technology is really decades away. And so what this is saying, it's insurance companies have some time, to really still understand the impacts and certainly the risk around this and come up with the models that are going to be not only beneficial to them as the insurer, but certainly to their customers out there. So I think in the near term, we're going to see that the accident avoidance technologies are going to have more immediate and positive impacts to the auto insurance industry, for example, and certainly to the customers. But as we look into the future, technology innovation and real-time data can significantly impact how insurance policies, for that matter, are issued or even modified based on the individual's risk profile. And so a couple of things I was thinking about this, as an example, you look at the Jetsons, right? We all remember the cartoon, the Jetsons and stuff. We're not that far away from technology, as you were saying earlier with the dental floss, right? I think ultimately we'll see cars having listening devices and different types of biometrics that can determine if the driver has been drinking, alcoholic beverages, and if they're even of the legal limit, or if they're drowsy, maybe they're tired, and based on how they're holding the steering wheel or their driving behavior will determine that, boy, the driver might be drowsy and stuff. And we could see this in our computer technology in the dash of our cars, generating alerts out there that, to the driver themselves that says, we know that you appear to be under the influence or that you're drowsy and that you shouldn't be driving. But if you choose to drive, your insurance rate for the next 12 hours, let's say, will increase by $2 per hour. So press here to accept. So, I think we're a ways away from that, but I think that could be the future with technology inside cars and how insurance companies will be able to use that to, do real-time insurance policies or premium increases.
That's really fascinating. Now, you got me thinking, like, in the same way that Progressive is using Snapshot to get a picture of how you drive, and the way you just described this scenario where biometrics in a vehicle can determine if a driver's been drinking, and then issue alerts, or almost like making the driver sign a waiver or something that their insurance rates are going to go up. I'm just wondering if insurance companies aren't already doing some of this just by looking at our social media. So, for instance, I just choose not to ever put pictures of myself on social media when I'm out drinking or anything like that, because I assume that at some point these insurance companies are going to come up with some kind of algorithm that will identify all the pictures in which I'm drinking, and then they'll adjust my rates. I'm wondering if they could go one step further and say, once they have the technology also in the car, they could then say, okay, this person's, I see their location on social media. They've posted that they're drinking. Basically, we know how many drinks they had because they're very forthcoming with their pictures. So now we know that they're going to be driving. And the same thing could be said for pictures of people eating unhealthy foods. If insurance companies start scouring our social media pictures and they see a lot of pictures of people eating pizza or whatever, or engaging in risky behaviors like, mountain climbing or whatever. Like, for instance, when our daughter had the reaction to peanuts and we didn't take her into the hospital because she just threw everything up. We gave her some Benadryl and she was okay. But had we posted a picture on social media or something, just to let people know that Sadie was okay or that she had the reaction, that's something that our health insurer could then pick up and say, oh, okay, well, we need to adjust some rates here. How long do you think it'll be before insurers start to use that kind of social media information to get a picture of how we live, whether it's life insurance, health insurance, car insurance, and then to use this sort of aggregate information as evidence to adjust our rates, And is there any evidence that they're already doing some of this stuff?
That's interesting. We've talked about some far-fetched things, right? But I think they ultimately become reality. And I think this is certainly one of them. Social media has been on the main stage here for a few years now. And I think every industry has probably looked at the impacts of social media and how it can be leveraged, not only for marketing and advertising perspectives, but also to gain that intelligence about their target, customers and users, right? And I think the insurance industry is right there in the same boat. I think there are insurance companies that have already begun looking at this and trying to figure out how they can harness that intelligence from social media, whether it's pictures or tweets or any type of information that's posted by a customer that can be used to manage or assess their risk by building data around their profiles and such. So I think that's something that is certainly already there. I think companies are like we've already discussed with self-driving cars and how they're using, snapshot by Progressive, for example, to measure our driving behavior. So I don't think it's far-fetched at all that we're going to see companies starting to embrace, leveraging social media as another tool out there to, assess their customers' behaviors and build information of the profiles that ultimately will then determine their insurance premiums or how they're rated to get a one premium rate versus another and stuff. So I definitely think that's probably on the near term horizon. It's just, again, it's leveraging, as we talked about earlier, it's making sure that they know how to leverage that data, how they integrate those systems, and how they can, truly provide that ultimately to the right employees and partners and such out there within their organization and outside of it to provide, the necessary offerings based on that intelligence. So it's not too far-fetched to believe that we're right there on the doorstep of that.
I think so. I think it's not going to be too long before the information just follows us wherever we go, and insurance companies and other companies just take greater advantage of the availability of that information. What would you recommend that insurance companies do just to guarantee that their mobile initiatives moving forwards are successful?
Well, I think that the first thing is when you look at insurance organizations, again, they've been predominantly very conservative. They've been so heavily focused on modernization of legacy systems and stuff that they, again, as we talked about earlier, the organizational readiness, that the first thing that companies really need to do is establish a shared understanding and vision across the organization around digital transformation initiatives and certainly around mobility. There was, again, some interesting research out there and some surveys that were done that when they went across the spectrum and interviewed various employees across an insurance organization, everybody had different definitions of what mobility was or is, and even what digital meant to them. So, and it spanned from, some employees thought, well, it's just, automation of paper processes. Some thought it was just providing online quoting. Some thought it was, what we're seeing already out there with consumer apps, just be able to extend their current systems to the consumer to drive self-service. So I think the first thing that, insurance organizations need to do is, they certainly need to develop a mobile strategy. And as part of that strategy, they certainly have to start off with creating that shared understanding and vision of what mobility is and what their digital transformation plan is, and then make sure they have the organizational structure that's going to support that vision and understanding out there. And then, certainly as a part of that strategy, as we talked about earlier, companies truly still don't understand what their consumers want or what they need. And so I think, they need to really put the right processes in place and go out and truly understand the day in the life of their customers, of their agents, and people that they truly are trying to target their digital or mobile initiatives at. And once they can get a true understanding of how, mobile and digital media will be used by their agents and by their customers and such out there, that will then really give them the basis for which they can start defining the roadmap, both short-term and long-term, over the next 6 to 12 months, as well as over the next 2 to 3 years, and where they're going to get the best and the quickest, benefits of mobility and digital transformation. And long-term, the things that they can put in place that will ultimately allow them to take the, advantage of the benefits that will be provided when we get to, self-driving cars, or really prove out the internet connected toothbrushes and other types of devices that can be leveraged inside of devices, whether it's a toothbrush or an automobile, and things, right, that can not only drive benefits for the insurer, but also certainly significant benefits for those their customers out there. So, long story short, to sum it up, they got to have a mobile strategy. They have to have the organizational readiness plan around it. They've got to really do a good job through their ideation processes and understanding the day in the life of their target users, whether it's internal or external customers, and ultimately need to make sure that maturity level wise, from an execution to delivery, that they have the things in place. It's not about running out and building an app and putting an app out there for my consumer. It's truly putting the infrastructure and the security and all the things that it takes to really deliver long-term a successful digital transformation of an organization and mobile out there. So it seems like a lot of work, and ultimately it is, but it's important that if companies are going to be successful in embracing digital and mobile technologies out there, that they have to put the right steps in place and follow those steps in order to really reap the benefits from it.
Well, James, thanks again for that awesome wrap-up of state of mobility in insurance companies.
I enjoyed it, Steve. Thank you so much, and I look forward to do another podcast with the Propelics Device Squad.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in to Device Squad, the enterprise mobile podcast from Propelics. All right, man.
Cool.
Take
Thanks,
care.
man.
Talk to you later. Bye-bye.